One of the things you always need to think about when you're building an application is how that application is going to physically be implemented, right? And even if you're not the implementer, you're not building the infrastructure, it's something you want to be aware of. Let's take an example. Let's say you've got some kind of image processing system. Let's say you've got maybe a web app where you've got marketing people taking pictures of products and they're sending them in and they need to be processed and need to be retrieved. Right? Well, we can think of that application kind of as a monolithic application where a number of different elements. We've got the idea of a web UI. You've got some kind of image processing. You've got probably some kind of database activity, some kind of large-scale storage that you need, right? Well, how are you going to implement this functionality? How is this going to work? Well, one thing, of course, I could build a monolithic application. Very few people are architecting in that direction for a lot of reasons, right? What I really want to do is partition this out, right? So I think they've got some logical partition layers here. And I think about how does that map to what we have in the Azure environment, right? So maybe I've got web apps that I'm using for the web UI. So here's my web UI. Right? And then maybe I'm using a logic app, or maybe I'm using a cloud service for the image processor. Could even be using a web job for that. All right. Obviously, I've got some kind of database storage. And then I also have some other type of storage, for the image files themselves, probably not in the database, right? Well, the advantage of partitioning this is now, first of all, depending on how I define this, I may have an application where I have more resiliency because I have, maybe a loosely coupled connectivity between these different elements. I also have the ability to scale, right? So I can say, okay, I need to scale up the web UI because I'm getting a lot of hits on this, all right? Once a week, normally I can run my processing on one or maybe two virtual machines. Maybe those are running as Azure virtual machines, but I need to scale that up, end of month when we get a bunch of new products and we get a lot of pictures come in, whatever that is, right? And I've got to really have a very highly scalable storage system because these images are high resolution images and we have a lot of products, et cetera, whatever it is. And by partitioning the workload, though, what you can do is you can define the way that you're going to scale. You're going to define the way that you're going to provide availability and resiliency to every one of these levels. Now, what that also means, though, is that you are going to spend more time architecting this solution, right? Because I have to think about the fact, not only do I have to think about how am I going to define my web application so it can scale out as a web application, but as it's doing that, how do I define it so it interacts properly while it scales with all of these other components, right? And all of these other components as they scale. Now, the good news is, by and large, Azure takes care of so much of that for you, right? You've got table storage. Great. Table storage, for example, is going to scale. Blob storage scales massively. SQL database, Azure SQL database is going to scale for you. You can set up scale sets for your virtual machines if you need to do that. And your web app is actually designed to make it very easy to scale. So you've got a lot of these things that are done for you if you start out with the idea of partitioning the workload of your application and figuring out how you're going to host that and how you're going to set up communication between those different layers to make for a responsive and a reliable and available overall application.